Some people are terrified of water, but I've always been afraid of staying on land. Hi, I'm Mary, and I was born at sea. My parents worked in sea freight and owned a ship. I never got seasick, often swam with dolphins in the open sea, and even steered our boat with Dad. I first set foot on land when I was 3 years old. It felt so weird that I panicked and hurried back. Sweetie, what's wrong? I'll turn into a dried up jellyfish if I stay on land. It took the whole evening for Mom to calm me down. She read me the fairy tale about the Little Mermaid as she put me to bed. From that moment on, I started dreaming of meeting a handsome prince.
Mary, help me with the map.
That's Mr. Jones. He was a friend of my parents and a real sea dog. Mr. Jones taught me to navigate by the stars, listen to the wind, and read paper maps.
The gadgets might break, and you would have to fend for yourself.
Don't worry, I studied just like all the other kids. Mom enrolled me in an online school and I studied remotely. One day, we stopped at a port. I came on deck and saw my parents talking to suspicious-looking people. Some guy even handed them a wad of money. Who are you talking to?
Just some random passersby.
I would have forgotten all about it if I hadn't heard another stranger talk the next morning. I was passing by my parents' cabin when I suddenly heard Mr. Jones's voice behind the door.
You shouldn't do that.
We have a daughter. We need to think about her future. Since my parents refused to talk to me, I asked Mr. Jones about it, but he just sighed.
Sometimes your parents and I disagree on things.
Soon, our ship stopped at Marbella, a seaside town in Spain. I stood at the stern and watched the sunset. A fresh breeze was blowing in my face. It was the best feeling in the world. Then, I saw a yacht passing by. Someone was setting off fireworks from it. When the yacht came closer, I saw a guy about my age on its deck. At that moment, it was like a tsunami hit me. He was gorgeous, just like the prince from my childhood dreams. I watched the yacht go by and stayed on the stern a bit longer. When I was about to leave, I noticed a silhouette in the sea. It was a boy. I took a closer look and recognized the guy I'd just been admiring. He was drowning. There was no time to think. I threw a lifebuoy overboard and jumped into the water. By the time I swam up to the stranger, he was barely clinging to consciousness. Hold on! I made him grab the lifebuoy and turned back to swim to our ship. Oh no! My parents were getting further away! I screamed at the top of my lungs, but of course, no one heard me. The yacht was also too far away, so I had no choice but to swim to the shore. Once on land, we collapsed on the sand, exhausted. When I looked at the guy, he was lying with his eyes closed and breathing heavily. Jeez, he looked like a Greek god. Then I realized I was on dry land, on solid ground. It was a disaster! I got down on my knees and crawled back toward the water. Despite my fatigue, I swam for a bit and soon felt better. But my relief didn't last long. What was I supposed to do now? I didn't have my phone with me and my parents had sailed away. The guy I saved suddenly moved and came to.
You saved me. Who are you?
I'm Mary. And you?
I'm Henry. I dropped my phone in the sea. While I was trying to get it back, the yacht rocked, and I fell overboard. No one saw it, and I'm not a good swimmer. If it hadn't been for you,
I was at sea with my parents, but they sailed away, and I don't know what to do.
we can go to my house. You can use my phone to call your parents.
I was over the moon. Henry and I were talking, but we were on dry land. I'd never spent so much time on it.
You okay?
I hesitantly nodded. At that moment, I felt like a beached fish. As we walked through the city, I looked around in wonder. Seeing all those streets and buildings was so weird. I was used to only seeing cities from the boat. At some point, a car stopped next to us.
Henry! Thank goodness I found you.
The man behind the wheel turned out to be Henry's personal driver. When we got into the car, Henry told me his family was originally from England. His dad was a diplomat and came to Spain for work. I listened attentively to Henry, right up to the moment the car started moving.
What's the matter with you?
I'm fine. It was my first car ride ever. I'd never suffered from seasickness, but it seemed land sickness was going to be an issue. So we stopped at a luxury villa that looked like a castle. Henry was definitely a prince. When we walked inside, the staff immediately rushed to Henry.
We were so worried about you. Mary saved me. If it hadn't been for her, I would have drowned. How noble. You are a hero.
Being the center of attention made me turn red as a lobster, so I asked Henry for a phone, but I couldn't reach my parents or Mr. Jones. I didn't know what to do.
If you have nowhere to go, you can spend the night here.
I agreed, and Henry showed me to a guest room. Compared to my cabin, it was huge, but instead of the sea, there was a courtyard outside the window. I only spent a couple of hours on land, but I already missed the water. I tossed and turned all night. I missed being rocked and listening to the sound of the waves. In the morning, I tried to call my parents again, but their phones were still off. Henry offered me breakfast. I wasn't about to say no to delicious was free food. As I sipped my tea, I sneaked glances at Henry. I couldn't help it. I'd fallen for him at first sight. As soon as I realized that, I turned red as a lobster and turned away to stare out of the window. News were playing on the TV. The presenter said that smugglers that had been illegally transporting goods by sea had been detained the night before. Imagine my shock when I saw my parents on the screen. It couldn't be happening.
What's wrong with you? You looked like you saw a ghost.
I muttered something unintelligible and ran outside. I had to get a grip of myself. That terrible news couldn't be true. But then I remembered my parents talking to the suspicious people at the pier. And then there was that fight with Mr. Jones. Were they really criminals? Henry came up to me. My stomach was in knots, but I tried to hide it. If he found out who I was, he wouldn't want anything to do with me anymore. In the end, I had to lie. I got a call from my parents, but they can't come get me yet.
Don't worry about it. You can stay here as long as you want.
Butterflies fluttered in my stomach as I looked at Henry's smile, but then an unfamiliar car drove up to the gate, and a beautiful girl got out of it.
Alicia?
I was so worried about you when I found out what happened. Thank goodness you managed to reach the shore.
Actually, Mary saved me.
Alicia turned out to be Henry's friend. Their parents were friends, so they had known each other ever since they were kids. Mary, you're so brave. I didn't do anything special. You're modest, too.
I'll leave you for a moment.
The second Henry left, Alicia's smile dropped. It was like she took off a mask and was now glaring at me without hiding her real feelings. Don't even think about it. Henry's out of your league. Stay away from him. Who are you to tell me what to do? Trust me, darling. I can ruin your life. I think you're all talk. Alicia started to say something, but Henry came back, and she acted like nothing had happened. That evening, I told Henry I was going to my room, and then I waited for the right moment and sneaked out of the house. I took the phone Henry had given me, opened a map, and came to the police station. I was hoping to find out something about my parents and see them, but I was in for disappointment. I was about to leave when I heard the cops talking to their boss.
We haven't found the jewelry those smugglers were transporting yet. Their missing daughter probably has it. So find her!
Were they talking about me? My heart immediately started pounding and I quickly left. Things were even worse than I thought. The next day, Alicia invited Henry and a lot of other kids over to her house for a party.
Okay, but I'm bringing Mary along.
When we got to Alyssa's place, I almost tripped over something weird and round. The thing suddenly started speaking and moving. What is this? Never seen a robot vacuum cleaner? Everyone burst out laughing, and I wanted to sink through the floor. Of course, I'd heard about them, but we didn't have anything like that on our ship. When we walked into the living room, Alicia asked someone to turn on the music. I thought she was talking to one of her friends, but the music suddenly started playing on its own. I flinched in surprise. First time hearing a voice assistant? What planet are you from? They kept making fun of me all evening, but Henry came to my defense time after time. He acted like a real prince. Eventually, Alicia's dad came home. When I saw him, I tensed up. He was the chief of police. Alicia was watching me closely. I felt uneasy and went out into the yard to take a breather. Once I was alone, I thought about my parents again. Why had they done that? I wished I could see them. The next morning, Alicia suggested we go on a boat ride. I loved the idea, but the same couldn't be said about Henry.
I still feel uneasy after that incident.
Come on, it'll be fun. Theo recently got a license. I finished the most expensive boat driving course. When we arrived at the port, I immediately noticed that the birds were flying towards the shore in flocks. After listening to the wind, I realized that a storm was coming. But when I told the others about it, they didn't believe me. Yeah, right. Look, the sky's clear. I knew it wasn't safe to go on a boat ride, but couldn't leave Henry. Everything was fine at first. After we left the shore, the other kids turned on the music and then started taking pictures and dancing. But soon enough, the sky grew dark. The wind got stronger and the waves bigger. We should go back. The computer's glitching. The navigation's broken. We need to turn it off and drift. Are you crazy? I knew what I was doing, but Alicia started arguing with me again. We should have listened to Mary and stayed on the shore. She knows what to do. What could she possibly know? The boat was suddenly tossed by a wave. Alicia waved her arms around and fell overboard. Help! I grabbed a rope, quickly tied it around my waist, and threw the other end to Henry. Tie it to something. After
After he secured the rope, I jumped into the sea. A huge wave immediately washed over me. I stayed underwater, swam up to Alicia and grabbed her around the waist and dragged her back to the boat. Swimming with just one hand was hard, but I managed. Theo and Henry dragged us on board.
Wow, that was something. You are so cool.
Alicia was trembling and hiccuping. I led her off the deck, wrapped her in a warm blanket, and put a cup of hot tea in her hands.
Why did you save me? I hate you. Just shut up and drink your tea.
Soon the storm ended, but the navigation still wasn't working. I waited for the sky to clear up and determined the direction we needed to go in by the stars. Thanks, Mr. Jones. In the end, we successfully reached the shore. After that incident, no one mocked me anymore. Everyone admired my skills, except Alicia, of course. She kept glaring at me with eyes full of hatred. Maybe I shouldn't have saved her. I called Mr. Jones the next morning without much hope, but to my surprise, he answered.
I'm so glad you're okay.
Mr. Jones confirmed that my parents were smugglers. He had tried to stop them, but they wouldn't listen.
Their ship was confiscated. I'm in trouble too, so I can't come get you.
Don't worry, I'll be fine. I didn't want Mr. Jones to worry, but I knew I couldn't stay at Henry's place forever. A couple of days later, Alicia said she was throwing a masquerade party.
Henry, let's invite everyone to your place. The interior here is perfect for it.
Alicia's friends talked Henry into agreeing. That same day, I overheard her discussing the party with her friends.
I bought a gorgeous dress. Henry will be pinning for me by the end of the night. I will look particularly great standing next to that Mary.
I didn't have a dress, but Alicia's words made my blood boil. I was going to have a great time no matter what. When I walked into my room, I saw a gift box on the bed. Inside it was the most amazing dress I'd ever seen, and a note from Henry. It's the least I can do for you. My breath caught in my throat. Was it just gratitude? Or did he feel something for me too? I went to the beach and picked up some beautiful shells there. I had to stay up all night, but by morning, my unique marine mask was ready. That evening, I put it on along with the dress Henry had given me. When I came down to the living room, there were already guests there. When they saw me, they froze.
This is a dress from the last collection.
Your mask is amazing.
Ugh.
I only had eyes for Henry though. When I came down, he asked me to dance.
Beautiful stranger, can I see your face?
Only after you show me yours, Prince Charming. It was a night to remember. I felt like I was in a fairy tale. Alicia kept picking on me and bothering Henry, and even tried to pour fruit punch over me. At some point, Henry grew tired of it.
You should have thanked Mary saving you.
The Baywatch wannabe? No way.
Henry took my hand and led me out into the yard.
Let's run away from here.
I was ready to run to the ends of the earth if it meant he would keep looking at me like that. We came to the embankment, looked at the full moon, and listened to the sound of the waves. I felt happy next to the sea. Well, almost happy. I couldn't stop thinking about my parents. As soon as I wondered how they were doing, I heard a familiar voice. I looked around and saw Mr. Jones at the dock. Wait for me here. I'll be back soon. Mr. Jones was talking to the people who had handed money over to my parents.
It's all right. I have the jewelry. I'll transport it on a new ship.
I realized I had been wrong the whole time. Mr. Jones was the smuggler. When he tried to get my parents involved, they refused and he set them up. A hand fell on my shoulder. I flinched, turned around, and saw Henry. I wanted to tear my hair out. Henry had heard everything and must have figured out what happened. When we came back to the embankment, he looked at me carefully.
So, your parents were arrested for smuggling?
That was it. Denying it was pointless, and I just nodded silently. I expected Henry to turn around and leave, but when he hugged me, I froze in shock.
I figured it out a long time ago, but it doesn't matter, especially now that we know your parents are innocent.
Tears stung my eyes from relief. The way he comforted me convinced me he was my Prince Charming. When we came back home, we ran into the chief of police. Henry's dad was standing next to him. Alicia immediately came out and pointed at me.
I've been watching Mary for a long time and noticed she's been acting weird. Her parents are criminals. She should be in prison with them.
We have a reputation to maintain. How could you bring this girl into our house?
To my surprise, Henry stepped in front of me and turned on a video of Mr. Jones talking to the smugglers. When had he even had the time to film it?
See, Mary's parents had nothing to do with it. You should let them go.
I didn't dare believe it would work, but Henry convinced his dad and the chief of police Mom and Dad weren't guilty. Alicia was furious, but there was nothing she could do. It took some time, but eventually my parents were released. When we met, Mom burst into tears and wouldn't stop hugging me. Mr. Jones was arrested soon after that. It was a shame. My teacher teacher turned out to be a criminal, but he got what he deserved. Our ship was returned to my parents.
So, you're going back to sea?
My place is there. I will always wander the sea.
Then I will always wait for you on the shore.
Our story could have ended there, but it was just the beginning. Henry and I talked on the phone a lot, and soon became an item. I still live on the boat with my parents, but I also often stay on land. I even visited Henry in England. Can you imagine? Soon he will go on a sea voyage with us. Do you want to hear more about it?